reminds me of like a lot of your questions, Zach, during lunch about accountability. So I think there is some kind of accountability in a way, because you're supposed to represent your, the work that you kind of did with the help of your group mates yesterday in presenting. Although I don't think that we at all reiterated that message today. That like you represent some of the work that that you did together yesterday.
Did we do that at all?
No,
today?
I didn't even remember that until just now.
That's an interesting thought.
And realistically, what accountability is there? Like, I think we talked about, like, what are the incentives? Is it like a grade? Is it a score? Is it 2 minutes of like being uncomfortable in front of 3 people who are looking at you, expecting so? Like, what is it that actually makes you change your behavior, or better access resources, or whatever it is? Like, what are the stakes that would actually get someone to do that?
I think for me, I see status as a big one, as a big reward, because we mentioned when we told the groups, there was every group was gotten back together and we said, hey, before you guys solve this problem, everyone take a moment, take 1 minute, we said, and ask everybody in the group what their strategy was. And I think we all noticed nobody did that, not a single group. But in this project, there was not a single student who did not present a problem. And I see that as kind of the reward for itself, that if for nothing else, for 4 minutes, this is my class. I am speaking. And I don't think there was a single student who I saw who didn't present. Like, there wasn't a single student who just sat there. There was one who goes, well, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I'll just show you guys, like, and she took it very flippantly. But that was only one person that I noticed in 3 classes.
But there was the one kid in the very first class, that group, they were sitting towards the back, and they finished so quickly. He was the very first presenter, and I was really concerned about that, because the girl that you mentioned earlier, I'm just not that concerned about her status. Her social status is high enough that I'm not so concerned about, like, I don't know, I shouldn't say that, but when her academic status is being kind of challenged, she at least has one thing going for her. She has a lot of friends, she participates well, things like that. That boy in that first block class has like 0 status in the class. And this, I think, really could have been maybe not damaging, but definitely
Well, and I think, assuming that 4 minutes, for that 4 minutes that the class is yours as a reward, is really assuming a lot about what the student would prefer to do. I mean, I think we could maybe imagine that with our personalities, but the 4 minutes talking about a problem to your peers could be petrifying to many students that are not comfortable, or that don't have an answer, or that feel like they don't have something to offer. So, I think for when you bring up status, it kind of brings up something different for me, that there are these individuals that often are the ones that are explaining things, and they do need to improve their ability to explain things in order to help each other and to just be more articulate with their mathematical communication. But also, if we're talking about collaboration, there's individuals. There's individuals that need to improve their ability to stop people, or they need to have a not a sense of entitlement, but a sense of not duty, but a right to ask questions, a right to stop, a right to verify or follow up, or say I don't understand. And maybe we almost need a rubric. I don't think we need another rubric, but we've really focused on the deliverer of the information. But what are the characteristics of effective receiving of the information? What are you doing when you're in a group and you're not talking? How do you make sure that you're engaged on that end?
I feel like we put a lot of focus on the presenter getting feedback about their communication. Like, I feel like that we heavily valued that, versus like, what's the point of being able to explain clearly? It's so that people understand you. Well, or maybe that's one point of it. And I don't think we did that very much. I think it was heavily skewed the other way.
To some degree, yeah, but I feel like those two, they kind of, because we were focused on one, I think there was development of the other. And I think if we'd said, by the way, I want you guys to focus on this and focus on this, I think we would have lost a lot. We would have had kids so busy on focusing on what they're supposed to be focusing on, they wouldn't have been focusing on the math. So because we mentioned having 4 things on the rubric already seemed like a lot. If we say, and by the way, while you're doing this rubric, I want you also to be thinking about this other, whether it's a rubric or whatever frames in mind.
Well, I don't think, I don't think that was our original intention. I think for what we originally intended to do, which was get students, or have students provide feedback to people who are presenting a mathematical idea, I think this was very effective in terms of clarifying what is important when you're explaining things, and the types of things that you need to include in some sort of presentation. I think what we're thinking about now is how useful is that skill in a real life everyday math class.
Right.
I mean, how often is a single student presenting an idea to a group of students that aren't necessarily confused on the problem, and they're really just evaluating how clear they are in these variety of domains.
Okay, let's go. Well, I want to say one thing though. I do think even with that student before, I want to address that. The student who we said went really quickly, and it may have reinforced that. I still got to think that's a reward, because one of the things you hear the most often of students who drop out of school is that they weren't noticed, they were invisible. Not too often you hear students say, my teachers just kept pointing it out and I just felt stupid. Now we do hear that in math classes a lot, that they feel dumb, but I feel like way more often it's I wasn't even noticed.
Right.
And I do think there's something to be said for, you know what guys, I didn't do well on the problem, but I'm still this is still about me and I'm important today. I don't know if it's always a good thing.
I guess, are they important, or are they important because we said you have to be important for 4 minutes? Like, you have the spotlight.
But see, I don't know, but I have this feeling that this is still something that was beneficial for even that student today. I don't think this was a project that hurt him.
I feel like, I don't remember at what point we talked about this, but we are kind of or maybe it was yesterday, artificially creating these ways for them to be successful. And when in life does this actually really happen, where someone is really trying to set you up to be successful? My instinct with that kid in that first class who finished really early, the first thing I just thought of right now is I should have put this other kid, Parker, in his group, because Parker really knows how smart this kid is, and Parker would have assigned a lot of status to him during the presentation and would have, I don't know, given him some confidence. Yeah. But is that realistically how that is gonna, play out beyond school? I don't know. Probably not.
Well, but think about the residue of this. What is gonna last from this? What happens the next time you give these guys a question and you say, and by the way, you may be presenting this to each other tomorrow. You may be, you may not. Or whether you say you are or you say you may be, do you think that there would be an increased thought about, I better explain things a little better, or if we did add, maybe this time we didn't have enough group accountability, but do you think that if we said, and by the way, you're responsible for your group, do you think there was some learning here of these guys saying, and when I present, I need to be thinking about diagrams and visual, I need to not go too quick, I think some of that residue is going to be there.
I definitely think so. I'm really having a hard time fully buying your thought, though, that it's beneficial for everyone to be in the spotlight, unless it's a positive experience, though. And I have a hard time empathizing with that, because that's not my personality. But I know and have talked to enough students that any sort of attention drawn to them is petrifying, again, and that if it's not an utterly positive experience with supportive people, it can be turned off.
My hunch is this would make that student dread presentations even more. Just I feel like it adds another not even a neutral experience, because when you don't say anything in a group and maybe the other 3 people do stuff, maybe you're not being noticed, but you're not the sole focus in that moment for 4 minutes, having to shed light on this problem that no one else has seen or no one else has really thought about.
Which I think is why there's another component to just of what we're trying to get on a daily basis of just explaining things well, which is how do you engage your partners in active communication and collaboration? How do you make sure that people we gotta go. But how do you make sure that people's voice are in the conversation, and how do you feel like people are heard, and how do you make sure that participation is more equitable?
I definitely don't think that this is reason to not, just because people are unsuccessful with this doesn't mean we avoid doing this, but I think it means maybe we have to be a little more careful.
And I do want to think, though, to challenge that just a little bit, making sure that everyone's equitable and everyone's voice is heard, I think takes a lot of the authenticity out of the whole presentation process. In the end of, we value everyone's voice being heard, we value everyone growing, and we talked about this a little bit, but we also mentioned what is the intrinsic value for a student to say that, by the way, when you're in a group, you need to make sure that you take time to let everybody, like, I just don't know how authentic that is either.
School's not an authentic environment. I mean, the point of the school, the point of, I think, of what we're trying to do is not create an authentic environment, but create an environment that's most conducive to most people learning the most they can, which I think does necessitate some inauthenticity in it. You know, like we're creating the ideal environment, not necessarily an authentic environment.
And on that note, do you think most people got a lot out of these presentations, or do you think that there were enough people who this would have backfired, this would have been negative, this would have reinforced negative connotations, that we'd say, no, this wasn't?
I would say that based on just the skimming of the feedback, I'd say most people did benefit from this in terms of presenting ideas. Yeah. And I don't know in terms of mathematically, I think people got really good, understanding of their problem. Yeah. But hopefully this is building capacity for future, explanations and different things that will push understanding mathematically as well. Because I'm not sure I'm not sure if the audience members really felt that they were the audience in terms of understanding more math compared to just critiquing from a perspective.
Well, let's think about the feedback. Do you think the feedback was beneficial for most people, or do you think that maybe we kind of missed the boat on that one?
I mean, I feel like I have no idea until we read until we read the reflections on how they felt about the feedback. I feel like I don't know.
Okay.
I think they liked getting feedback though. Like, I think it was completely related to what they were like. They have an investment in themselves, so I think that they wanted to see that feedback. But I think also whether it results in, I don't know. I mean, no.
But ultimately, whether or not they're comfortable giving presentations, it is an important skill to have, and that I think it's our duty to, increase the level of comfort with that type of activity, but make sure we do it in an environment that they feel safe and ready to engage, not one in which they're turned off. And I'm not saying that because I think that was the case, but that's just something that we have to continue to be conscious of, that could be.
Yeah.
And part of it
happens.
To answer that, just because I don't want to forget this later, is the huddle idea that we kind of threw out the first day, which was like, hey, let's send them into huddles because they're stuck. I think actually if we had thought about that a little beforehand and made that a little more solid, that could have been where we would have caught a lot of those students and given them that confidence to present.
Right.
And I'm thankful we did it at all.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful you threw that idea out and we had the time to do that, because I think it would have been really scary if we hadn't.
Yeah.
So the huddles is something we want to consider in the future, is making that a very important part of this process.
As a way to make that feel safer.
The other thing too, gosh, we have like so many things, but I think the whole activity made kids feel more comfortable actually giving constructive criticism. Like I felt like they were more comfortable with not saying like, oh, just good job. Like they felt like enabled to say, this is what I liked, but I wasn't sure about this, and it was safe to do that, I think.
I think the modeling was key there.
Yeah.
And it'd be,
so true.
Definitely.
It would be interesting to see how the feedback they gave me compared to the feedback they gave their classmates.
Right.
But it definitely seemed like that opened up some, with you guys presenting some ideas, and the second period seemed uncomfortable with the amount of feedback you were giving me.
They didn't like that. They're like, ouch, you're so harsh.
But I think we tried our best to normalize that and not make it something that is bad, and I think that came across.
And I think that's kind of their joking and teasing too. I mean,
I do think, and just looking at the feedback when you first spoke, and I'm looking at 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4,
and it was
4,
just
3,
like
3, 3,
good,
3, 4, 4.
Clear.
And then they heard like, wait a minute, but he's the teacher. He can be improved upon too. I really do think it was kind of eye opening for him when we modeled that. And then a lot of them, especially that third period, gave you a lot of really helpful feedback. And I don't know if you caught this, but it's really cool. Like, I liked your presentation. I really appreciate.
They really started with the.
They did, and it's like, wow, I think.
I know.
And so it was cool to see the kids model it for the other kids.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah.
But now I think we agree. We kind of do have to look at the data and see what we get from the reflections too.
So now we know what to do for our KSTF alumni fellowship visitation observation.
That's true. We'll follow it
next year.
Oh, it's gonna be so great.
All right.
We gotta go.